Hi there. Um, Welcome to my live session where I'm going to talk to you a little bit about a new resource that I'm really excited about, that we've spent a lot of time developing and thinking about and drafting and all of that, and to sort of celebrate the launch of this really great new resource that we have for students that's going to be absolutely free. Before I get into that, thank you so much for joining me. My name is Dr. Sarah Klebe, and I'm an admissions expert with BeMo Academic Consulting. So if you're just joining us, coming in a few seconds after we got started, I want to talk to you about this great comprehensive guide that we've been working on. This is the most comprehensive guide to CASPer Test Prep that we have in terms of our website resources. So our resources that are free to all of our students, to all visitors to our site, and that is our definitive guide to CASPer test preparation for 2019. So you might be asking yourself, okay, what actually is a definitive guide? Well, what we've tried to do is first collect the resources that we already have posted and make them really easy to access. All of the other free online CASPer resources that we have been linked in one way or another through this resource. And don't worry, I'll make sure that you have the URL for this and all of that after I'm done here, in case you're wondering how you're actually going to access this thing. So all of these other resources that we have, if you've been on our website, you've been on our blog, you know that we have just a ton of resources in every different category around admissions. And we certainly have a wealth of information around CASPer. We have a lot of sample questions, some that you can work on your own, some that come with really useful expert answers that you can look through and think about. We have some strategies, some standard information around CASPer dates and schools that use CASPer and things like that, which we constantly update from year to year. And so this one resource will allow you to really easily find and access all of those other materials, but it needs to be emphasized, most of the information in this definitive guide is new. It's not just a summary of our other blogs or anything like that. So there's a lot of additional information that sort of fills in some of the gaps. Now, some of you might know we have a book on CASPer. This will also act as a supplement to that, in that it acts as a really great summary. There's some new information in terms of new sample questions, new expert answers, some other ways of just sort of looking at some of the materials that we've presented to you, but some new stuff mixed in there as well. So this is a pretty substantial document. I'm just going to pull it up really quickly here and look through it so that I can give you an overview of what you'll see if you go and check this out. So we talk about some of the rationale behind the CASPer test, what it purports to evaluate, and how you can think creatively about that and make sure that you have a really firm foundation before you begin your own preparations if you haven't started already. And if you have started already, this will act as maybe, again, something that'll fill in some gaps in your knowledge that might currently exist. We look through the purpose of the CASPer test, not just what it purports to do, but the kinds of things that it evaluates or that the evaluators are looking for when they're rating your answers. And again, some of this is very practical material, some of it's more sort of theoretical, or just, giving you something to toss around a little bit to think about as you prepare for the test and the questions that you'll experience there. We want to make sure that you have a really firm understanding of what exactly the test is meant to do as a situational judgment test. There's also resources in there to help you understand what a situational judgment test is. Again, what its purpose is, what it's meant to evaluate, and how you can utilize that knowledge in really effective and actionable ways. We spell out some of the fundamentals of the test format itself. As you may know, we have lots of packages with BeMo where you can do simulations of CASPer that we make as realistic as possible. But even if you've gone through that simulation or gone through a similar simulation, the overall format of the test is still something that can be continuously clarified. And this is intended, again, to give you some working knowledge, but also to help alleviate some of that fear of the unknown, right? One of the hardest parts of these kinds of evaluations is simply not knowing what you're in for, not knowing what you're actually going to be doing when you're sitting down, not knowing how the different stations are divided up, and things like that. So giving you something that will, again, help you in really actionable ways, but that will also help take away some of that stress and anxiety that comes from just the nature of taking, excuse me, an evaluation of this kind. We also talk about how the test itself is evaluated. We give you a lot of information, not so much on numerical scoring in this one. We do have a link to another blog that goes into the numerical scoring of CASPer, but what the evaluators, what the CASPer raters are actually looking for when they're reading your responses. And of course, not just what they're looking for, but how you can demonstrate those things. After that, we talk about some really concrete strategies for preparing for CASPer in terms of really getting a deep and nuanced understanding of the kinds of questions that you're going to face, what the purpose of those different kinds of questions might be, and some advice and resources for getting expert feedback. So again, you may know, for example, that CASPer tends to ask a lot of situational, sort of hypothetical scenario questions. They ask questions about policy. They ask questions that are more on sort of that personal level where they want to sort of get to know you through the questions, and then kind of quirky questions, sort of weird or oddball questions that are really meant to test your creative and critical thinking on the spot. So being able to really understand what that means in each context and how to actually work with that information is going to be really, really useful for you in your preparation for CASPer. And then the final section is, again, some sample questions that you can work with, but also some expert responses to those questions. One of the things that we really try to address in this particular definitive guide is the form that you should be looking at, as opposed to the specific answers or words that are written. We don't want to give you things that you can memorize. That's not going to work, first of all. And you're also not going to really learn much of anything. You know, they say that you can't prepare for a test like CASPer, and we sort of reject that idea. We think that it's absolutely true that you're never going to know what questions you're going to get. So preparing in that sense, preparing for a specific question definitely isn't possible, but there are certainly more and less effective kinds of answers to the kinds of questions that they offer. So that's one thing that we, again, really try to highlight in this particular post. And so we do that, again, through addressing things on a foundational level, on a functional level, on a bit of a theoretical level, but also through the expert answers that we provide. So the content of these, again, wouldn't be something that you could memorize and work with. It wouldn't even make sense to do that because the answers to CASPer questions tend to be sort of, you know, deeply personal reflections. Even on hypothetical scenario type questions, you're still speaking from a deeply personal and reflective space. So rather, we're showing you how to organize your ideas in ways that help you demonstrate the qualities that are being looked for. Those qualities being things like maturity and professionalism, strong communication skills, adherence to ethics, ability to do critical and creative thinking and to do so on the spot, and to just otherwise demonstrate that you are indeed a good fit for the program, the school, the vocation that you are aspiring to. So I'll give you a little preview of those sample questions just to give you something to start sort of thinking about and reflecting on, and then you can check out the blog again. I'll make sure that the link is available to you in just a few minutes when we finish up here. You can read the expert responses and start thinking about how you might want to approach this from your own unique perspective. So one of the questions, I'll give you two of the prompts. I'll give you, let's see, I'll give you our scenario and maybe our quirky. Let's see how I feel when I get done with scenario and I scroll down. So one of the new scenarios that we've crafted for you to think about, reflect on, and respond to in your own practice is the following. You're at the airport with your family, preparing to board a plane to your favorite vacation destination. The flight attendants prepare to begin calling passengers for boarding. And prior to calling those passengers in advance, the attendant asks if there are any passengers with disabilities who would come forward so that they can get priority boarding. Right, this is something that I think if you've been to an airport, you've seen this happen even before first class. They generally have certain classes of individuals that they ask to come forward for priority seating, and passengers with disabilities would be one of them. So again, back to the scenario here, you see a couple, a young man and a young woman, in say their mid to late 20s from all appearances, begin moving toward the desk to board. The man is carrying all of the luggage. They're smiling, they're laughing, and they don't appear to have any visible complications with their movement. And neither is using any kind of visible mobility device like a cane or crutches or a wheelchair. And in this scenario, as they move past you to get their priority boarding, the woman behind you in line sighs very loudly. And you turn and look at her, and she's glancing around at everyone. She's visibly annoyed, and loudly she states, "This is unbelievable. Look at them." She notices that you're looking at her, catches your eye, and looks at you expectantly and says, "You know what I mean, right?" Gesturing towards the couple who've overheard all of this and look visibly upset. So the questions that follow that, first and foremost, what would you do in this situation? Right? You're faced with a real dilemma here, potentially some conflict. There is something that is possibly taking place in front of you, and they would want to know how you're going to navigate this difficult situation. Are you going to say nothing? Are you going to ignore it? Are you going to side with this woman? Are you going to scream at her? Preferably not that, but how are you actually going to deal with this? And this is something that I've actually seen happen not too long ago. So this is a very realistic scenario. The second question there poses something a little bit more advanced. To use accessible parking spaces, disabled patients have to display a special placard or get a special license plate. Do you think that similar documentation should be required for accommodations like the one posited in the scenario, getting that priority boarding on a flight? Why or why not? How are you going to navigate that? And then the third question asks you to describe a time when you intervened on behalf of someone else in a public space. That is to say, is there a time in your life when you have been what we would call an upstander, not a bystander, right? We know what a bystander is, someone who sees something happening that requires or would be useful to have some kind of intervention of some kind, and bystanders generally do not intervene. Upstanders, however, do the opposite. They're ones who do make that intervention and advocate on behalf of people who need advocating, or facilitate their ability to do whatever it is that needs to be done. So that's one of the new scenarios that we've created for you to think about and to practice for your CASPer test. The other one I'll give you, we'll say the personal one, because personal questions can be really tricky, right? These personal questions tend to ask about things that we have to be really careful talking about. They can usually be either quite positive or quite negative. So a time that you succeeded or a time that you failed. If you're talking about a time that you succeeded, you don't want to come off as someone who's bragging. You don't want to make yourself look good by putting others down. And when they ask about something negative, like a time that you failed, well, that's not something most of us are really comfortable disclosing to most people, regardless of context, let alone to strangers, strangers who are evaluating our responses, for the purposes of something as monumental as the professional school or program that you're trying to get into, and doing so in a situation where you're already under a lot of stress and pressure. So the personal prompt and questions from our definitive guide is this. Here's the prompt. From time to time, we all make decisions that we regret, whether bound by less than ideal circumstances, lack of resources to make the best decision, or lack of foresight or maturity. Everyone has made a bad or an unfortunate decision in their lives, right? One of those negative situations that we may not really feel comfortable disclosing to others. The questions that follow the prompt. First, can you reflect on the decision that you've made that you later regretted? So there we go again, that negative circumstance that we don't want to disclose. There's a sample answer there that really demonstrates how to walk through this question and how to do so in a way that admits the shortcomings that you may have, because we all have them. Certainly I do. The answer itself is mine, so you get to hear about a time where I made an unfortunate decision and how I wrestled with that. Second question, how can one move past or learn from such regret? How can we build on the mistakes of the past? And how have you specifically done that? How can you show your resilience, your adaptability, your ability to reflect on something that maybe you're not happy with or proud of, and do so in a productive way? And then the third question there, did you ever make what seemed like a bad decision only to later learn that it was still the best decision at the time? So a lot to think about there for both of those. Again, when you go to the actual blog, you'll see the other questions that we've created for you, see our sample answers to these, and start thinking through your own answers to these questions. Again, what's most important here, though, isn't so much the content of the answers, but the form that it takes and the function that the answers fulfill. And so this new comprehensive guide to CASPer that we've created, the definitive guide to CASPer for 2019, will really help you think through all of this on your own, think through the bigger journey that you're on as not just a student or a future worker, but as a human being right now. So that's one thing that I really like about it, is that it is absolutely full of practical, actionable advice, but there are also a few moments in there that help you realize the context, the wider context of what you're doing, right? As you're on a journey to education and to eventually becoming a working professional, you're also in a process of becoming yourself, right? Thinking about who you are and who you want to be, not just what you want to be, or not just what you want to do, not just what labor you want to enact, as important as that absolutely is, but to think of it as also part of your own human story. So those are the details of our new guide. I hope that you will check it out and maybe give us some feedback on it. Again, in just a few minutes when this posts, I'll make sure that a link is available to you. I'll also probably post it just on its own in the next day or so, just to make sure that those who weren't able to make it to our live session tonight are fully aware of it. It's going to be a really, really great companion to your own work in moving toward the CASPer test, whether you're taking it next week or next month or 6 months from now. It's something that's going to be sort of timeless and relevant regardless what stage you're at and regardless of when you're actually taking the test. So I think I've taken up plenty of your time at this point. If you were able to join us, I thank you so very much. Please, if you liked this, be sure to like it, share it with a friend who would find it helpful. And you're always welcome to reach out to us at BeMo so that you can let us know how we can best support you in your journey, both educational and vocational. So until next time, thank you so very much for your time, and take care.